Welcome to Bullies, Wimps, and Poverty Pimps, a bi-weekly podcast with me, Dr. Kish Cumi Price. Hello and welcome back to Bullies, Wimps, and Poverty Pimps. I am Dr. Kish Cumi Price, and we have started our series on wimps. And if you didn't catch the first episode, you might want to. I've actually thought about re-recording that one. I listened in and it sounds like there's some issues with the sound quality, so I might end up re-recording that one, but it's really difficult to do that sometimes because of the essence of the content being shared and having to kind of replicate that, but I might do that. But to give some highlights and to kind of move into this next phase, we are aware that there is a lot of tendencies for us in general to be in a place of wimping out, right? Wimping out for ourselves, wimping out for others, not really knowing how to stand up for yourself, not knowing how to stand up and advocate for others. And because of this, because there's somewhat of an epidemic of wimps and wimping, there are a lot of things that haven't really moved forward. There are a lot of initiatives that have not moved forward. There are a lot of communities that have not gained traction and the support that they need because of this epidemic. And so I don't want to make light of it. I think it is absolutely important to discuss it. I think it's important to give resources to help people to move past this tendency to wimp out, to not really show up, and not to claim power in space. And so to start off, I thought it would be helpful for us to go back to something that was shared before, which is why this series is titled Wimpletons, right? Because of the alignment with the word simpleton, right? Simpletons. And there were a couple of references that I mentioned in the last episode about simpletons and what Solomon had to say about simpletons in the book of Proverbs. And it talks about simpletons being simpletons because they have a lack of knowledge. They're foolish because they don't have knowledge, and they almost wear their foolishness with pride. And in order to be prudent, you gain knowledge. You want to know. So I think that's the first place to start today, and breaking down what Wimpletons look like, how they show up, how we have shown up as Wimpletons, right? And that first thing is not desiring to acquire knowledge. And it sounds almost ridiculous because who doesn't want to know, right? But a lot of times people intentionally desire to be ignorant. So you may know that something may be a little bit off, but you don't really want the details of it. You don't want to get involved. You don't want to know how to actually solve a problem. You're okay with just continuing to address the symptoms, and you're not really interested in root causes. You really don't want to get to the root of the issue. Sometimes people feel like it's the addressing the symptoms that helps to keep them relevant and employed, right? Like, well, if we really solve this issue, I won't have a job. Well, that's what we should be doing, right? We should be working toward solving problems, not trying to keep problems in front of us so that we continue to stay relevant, if that makes any sense. So that first issue is a very big one, not wanting to acquire, not desiring to acquire knowledge. So that shift needs to happen. If you're saying, I know that I have been in a place of wimping out, I have not shown up in my power, I have not shown up to advocate for myself or anybody else for that matter, it starts with the desire to acquire that knowledge. And it could be a multitude of things, right? It could be having knowledge about a particular issue. It could actually be from a more introspective space, having knowledge about what it is that you want what do you want out of a situation, or how are you showing up in a space? Are you getting what you need? Do you need to advocate for the resources that you need? And if we're talking about in a workplace environment, do you have the knowledge to know what to ask for? Like, do you know how to ask for more time to complete a project? Do you know how to, and are you willing to do that instead of stressing yourself out? Are you willing to ask, these are the things that I'm actively working on. I'm engaged in these things. What's the priority right now? Like, I know you want me to do this new thing. Can we talk about priority? Or can I share my priorities and see if this is in alignment with what you need? Those are things that, you have to do. You have to be your own advocate. Nobody else really knows. And sometimes we think people are intentionally trying to bombard us with things or overwhelm us. And a lot of times it has to do with your ability to stand up for you, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is, you may be in a place, let's say you're volunteering your time to help with an initiative, and you want to advocate for, I'm doing this, and yes, I am volunteering, but it would be helpful if I had this or that in order for me to give you what you want, which is presence, information, my intellectual property, whatever it is. But be able to do that, have that reflection, self-reflection, to know, to get the knowledge of what is it that I need? What should I be asking for? What will make things better for me in this particular situation? And then when you are able to do that for you, you seemingly are able to do that better for other people. So if you're in the room as an advocate for somebody, or your job is to advocate for others, then you can show up as that same kind of present person who is engaged in acquiring knowledge. I want to know so that I can know better, right? When I know better, I do better, right? That is for one, my grandmother used to say it all the time. And now I know Maya Angelou is also credited with saying, when you know better, you do better, right? But that it should be that's the case. It's not always the case. Sometimes people know and they don't do better, but we should be striving for that. And so that's the number one thing. Get the knowledge, right? The second thing that Wimpletons tend to demonstrate is not desiring to seek understanding. So that next level after knowledge is understanding. So you can have all kinds of information, but if you don't understand it, how useful will it really be? So sometimes I know it seems like extra work to do these things. Like people, why do I want to acquire knowledge? That's more work for me. Or why do I want to really try to understand this thing? I'd rather just go ahead and do it. And I'll give an example of that. So a lot of times people are very much interested in moving an initiative forward. They want to do a thing, so they do the thing. But then best practice reveals that you probably should check in with the people that you're trying to do the thing for to see what they want. What do they really want? What do they really need? And I've noticed that although people know that that's the case, they also want to avoid really seeking understanding. They might do a survey or something, but do they really want to understand like the root of the problem? Do you really want to understand why there's this need for support? If we're talking about impoverished communities, do you really want to understand why a community is concerned about what's happening in their community when it comes to development? Do you really want to understand that the root of the concerns is that they may get pushed out of their neighborhoods because of fear of gentrification? Do you really want to understand how to appropriately respond to that fear? Because if your goal is, well, we just want to build, we just want to move forward, we just want to improve the community, okay, but are you ready to really listen. If you're saying you're going to build with the community, let's build with the community, but let's listen. Really seek not just the knowledge, but the understanding, right? So that's number two. So we talked about the desire to seek knowledge, the desire to seek understanding. And then the next thing is that desire to apply that knowledge and understanding. That's when we move into the wisdom phase, right? It's about acting on the knowledge and understanding, which qualifies you to be in a place of wise action, because now you are able to make educated decisions that are informed by not only the knowledge that you've acquired, but the understanding that you've received from that knowledge, right? And when we are able to do that, then now if things don't go as planned, okay, cool. But at least you did your due diligence to ensure that you received the information and you acted based on the understanding of that information. It's an iterative process. But if you are not engaged in those steps of really being intentional about acquiring the appropriate knowledge, applying it based on understanding, then you end up in a space where there's a lot to be desired, because you could be building a whole thing, right? A whole program, a whole uh, idea or notion based on erroneous assumptions, and that does nobody well, right? And that is a true, I believe, detriment to the growth and development of a community, is when resources are misappropriated. And when that happens, that means that, okay, this money was used to do this thing that was not vetted in the appropriate way, that could have best benefited, this organization or this community. So now you have to deal with the fact that you have something that isn't completely useful or slightly useful, could have been more useful. And also, when we talk about in the nonprofit space, it's really difficult when you have to watch programs and initiatives coming forth that would have been better served if another entity was able to move forward with the vision. It's if somebody who was going to be a little more attentive to that space of knowledge acquisition and understanding before acting. So those are ways that I think are really critical for us to have in mind of, what Wimpletons in the nonprofit space really kind of show up in that way. But it also applies, for profit. It applies in the corporate sector in many ways, right? Nonprofit and for profit. So the other element here that I think when we go even deeper is when we start talking about, like, what are these other indicators of Wimpletons? I would say the fourth one is courage, or the lack thereof, right? When you talk about someone showing up as a Wimpleton, is when, let's say you have knowledge, you have understanding, you have the way forward, you know how to act on that knowledge and understanding, but you just can't do it, right? Like, it's right, it's wrong, but you can't really say anything about it. You're very much attached to groupthink mentality. So if no one else is speaking, then you don't want to say anything. It's like you talk yourself out of being the one lone wolf, right? Like, you don't want to be that one voice that's going against, right? Especially when everybody else is like ready to go, closing out this thing, let's vote on it, or it's the end of the meeting, we've decided that we're going to do this thing, but it's a gnawing, it's a prompting, it's a knowing that you have that we didn't address this particular issue, or shouldn't we talk about this, or is anybody going to bring this up? When that's gnawing at you, when you have those thoughts or concerns, it's for you. So don't start looking around the room waiting for somebody to be the one. You're the one. That's where the courage is necessary. That's how you move out of the Wimpleton status into a warrior status, where you're actually standing in your power and you're able to move on what it is that you know you need to move on. So that is really key. Courage, to really operate in that courage. Now, easier said than done, right? So I know some of you listening or watching may be thinking, it's not that easy, right? Like, just to be courageous. And you're right. So I welcome you to think about your why. You know, why are you in the space? Why did you take on the title? Why are you in the job? Why are you in the role? Why does it matter beyond you, right? What is your why? Are you doing what you're doing for you? Are you doing it for your family? Are you doing it for your community? Are you doing it for just a paycheck, right? And I get it. If that's the case, if your answer is the latter and it's just about money for you and you don't really care, you really don't. Like, you really don't care about what you're doing. I challenge you, and that's a very honest answer, right? So I appreciate you being vulnerable in that thought space, right? I know you're not sharing that with me, but if you're thinking that's my why is I'm just trying to get paid, like I'm just in a job, I'm fulfilling a role, don't really care. Well, I would like to challenge you as well by saying it's not a bad thing that you're working to get paid. Most people have, I mean, that is one of the realities of working, why we work, right? But if you know that you're in a space where you're thinking, I probably should say something because this is my role. In my job, I would do this if I actually cared about this thing. I am encouraging you and asking you really to tap into your why still, right? Like, your purpose. Why are you on this earth? Because if you're in a job where you are supposed to be advocating for somebody, where you should be speaking up and you can't get to that place because you're really just there to get a check, you're at fault. You're a part of the problem. You're taking a valuable job from someone who actually deserves to be in that job, that could help to solve the problems that you were hired to solve. I hope you're flowing with me, because I know that may be a little difficult to catch, but my point being, you're taking up space. You're just wasting space and time. You're even wasting your time if you're in a job that you really don't care about. Okay, so I just welcome you to think about that. Now, the next piece here, when we consider how to be courageous, it really has to do with that, like I said, the why, the purpose. If it's not from a positive perspective of I need to do this for me, or I need to do this for us or them, or, from a legacy standpoint or for the greater good, if that's not in your realm of consideration, then the more negative reinforcements for moving out of position to help the greater good is, why are you just taking up space? Like, we all have limited time on this earth. We don't know how much time we have on this earth. Nobody can actually say, this is when I know I will leave this earth. Even when you're trying, right? Let's just be real about it. So I believe that you're here for a purpose. You were created on purpose, with a purpose, for a purpose. And so if you embrace that, then don't waste your time. Don't spend 8 hours plus a day doing something you don't even care about, that you don't even have a true why for, right? That you can't even like step up for you or step up for anybody else. Oh, that's pointless. Like, why? You're just really wasting your life away. So being courageous has more to do with the bigger picture. Like, yeah, sure, you can just show up, collect a check, cool. But you also have to answer for that. So eventually, this life ends. And then, we're held accountable for what we did here, what we did and didn't do. So I don't know if that's encouraging anybody or not, but that is something that helps me to be courageous, is to always think about the why, the purpose, the beyond, the today, right? I'm very much planted where I am, being where my feet are, but also understanding that I believe that I know that I answer to a higher calling. So I'm a higher being. And for me, that is God, right? And I am in a place where I have to be cognizant of how I show up, why I'm showing up, and what I do when I show up and what I don't do, right? So let me put a pin in that for a minute. I have a few more points here, but courage sometimes is not just about acting and speaking up. Sometimes it's about being quiet. Sometimes it's about knowing when you need to hold your tongue for the greater good. Like, I really could say some things right now that probably need to be said. I'd feel much better getting it off my chest. But if it's going to keep us from moving forward, whether it's some deal that's being made, brokered, or an opportunity that's on the table, it also takes courage to be quiet. It takes courage to know when to speak up and when to shut up. That's courageous. So keep that in mind too. It takes courage to know when to act and when not to, right? Like, that's the thing. So keep that in mind, because you may be on either end of this at any point in time in your life. And it is courageous to not do a thing that you feel like you could and should and have the right to do. I'm just going to be honest. Like, there are times people can work your last nerve and you want to say so many things, like, and you could, right? You're hearing the discourse in your mind. You know what you want to say, but holding your tongue, that's courageous, because it's not beneficial for you or for that person in that moment, right? So anyway, keep that in mind. Next point is influence. Wimpletons have a lack of influence. Not that it's not available, but it's just because they're not tapping into it. They're not willing to tap into their influence. So we all have influence, whether we know it or not. Wimpletons choose to act like they don't have influence. They're not considering it, right? So you're not understanding that the power of your silence, you're not understanding the power of your voice, you're not understanding the power of your action, the power of your knowledge and your understanding, right? That wisdom. So think about this. Think about if you come into the room, let's say you're a board member, let's say you're an employee, let's say you're a part of the team, let's say it's just with your family, you're having family dinner. How you show up, and if you think you have influence, let's just say there's a conversation about something important and somebody's speaking out on it, and everybody has the same kind of response to whatever it is that's being discussed, but you have a different thought and you're thinking differently, then you may choose not to say anything because you don't want to stand out as being different. This is what I mean when we talk about influence, because if I choose to remain silent, although I feel prompted, convicted to say something and I don't, I'm still influencing whether I know it or not. My silence is influencing. My head nods are influencing. My posture is influencing how I show up, right? You can tell if I'm engaged in a conversation. You can tell if I'm distracted. You can tell if I've checked out, for the most part. I mean, those are things that we can identify in people at times, and if we're attentive. And so sometimes we underestimate influence, and we all have it. How do you use it? If you're a Wimpleton, you're not really aware of it. You're not trying to use it. You're just there. If you understand influence and you want to tap into that influence, then you understand the power of your presence. You understand the power of your posture. You understand the power of your voice. understand the power of your prayers, right? So this is more of an active and an engaged person who gets it. They say, I'm not just a vapor, right? I am here. I am present. I may not be seen. I may not be heard. I may not be acknowledged, but I understand my influence. And regardless, I tap into that. I try to figure out how I can use what I have, which is influence. We all have that. How am I going to use it? How do I want to show up? How do I want to be seen? How do I want to be heard? How do I want to be acknowledged? And in turn, how do I want to see others? How do I want to acknowledge and show up and hear them and respond to them, right? So it's a two-way street there. And I think it is important for us to understand that that influence then leads to impact. So most Wimpletons believe there's a lack of impact. They think, who am I? What can I do? Little old me. When you are stepping out of that status and understanding that you truly are built to be a warrior, you are built to have influence, to impact situations, right? Then you carry yourself differently. You show up differently. You hear what's being spoken, and then you hear what's being received, right? You're a little more aware and attuned to reading the room. So you're not just hearing what's being said, but you're engaged in this element of how are people receiving what's being said. That helps you, whether you're the person speaking and delivering that message or you're the person receiving, you're able to be a little more aware of what people are saying and doing and responding to something, right? And I'll give an example. I've been involved with a litany of emergency crisis teams that prepare for different things in different ways, right? Whether that's been in the school setting, whether it's been in workplace settings, or whether it's been in the community. And when I think it should be said, everybody's not built for that, right? Everybody's not built to like respond to a crisis. But if you are, then you can relate to this. And I'll just explain. So you will be in a place where you're thinking steps ahead of where you are. Crisis has happened, but you're thinking steps ahead. You're thinking behind. You're thinking above and below, right? You're seeing the situation in 3D. And so when you step into a planning session about a crisis or an emergency, you're bringing all of these perspectives. And then you're wise enough to know, although I come with this knowing and this panoramic view of things, there are also blind spots. And so I believe that when you have the gift to respond to crises and plan and bring people together, you also know to plan for the blind spots. You know that you need to have people in the space, in the planning team, that can bring other perspectives, that can share what's really going to resonate in order to have a more holistic view of what's going on. And so if you don't understand impact and influence and courage and wisdom, meaning being able to apply knowledge and understanding and implement those plans based on all of that, then you kind of miss the boat, right? You may be planning, you may be trying to execute for a particular emergency or crisis, but your time is going to be off a little bit, right? You're not going to be responding as quickly as you should, or you're not going to be taking the time that you need to actually prepare a plan that is responsive to the need, right? It's a very delicate balance. You need to make sure you're giving ample time to plan what needs to be done, but also responding in a way that helps to prevent more emergency issues from developing, right? And so anyway, I think that's a way for us to kind of consider what it means, right, to rise to the cause. Because when you think about wimps or wimpletons, as I'm calling calling them and us at times, right, is that the other side of it is nobody wants to go to war with a wimp. Like nobody wants a wimp on their team, right? So that other side is the bold and courageous person, right? It is the person who can show up as a warrior that can actually, and it can be the same person. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. You actually can transition from a wimpleton to a warrior in understanding how you show up, understanding the power that you already have, understanding your presence is power, that your voice is power, your silence is power. Like what is needed in this situation, in this moment, in this circumstance, and how can I bring it? Like, what do I need to bring to the table? Do I need to be quiet? Do I need to step back so that somebody else can speak and have the floor? Do I need to usher somebody to that light, right? To have the stage, to speak? We can show up in so many ways in our warrior status, but we have to be aware of how we are presenting, how we are coming to the table. The other thing to just close us out here is power. And most Wimpletons believe they have a lack of power. They don't see themselves as powerful. They don't see themselves as showing up and being able to do much of anything. Like, well, what does it matter? I can't do anything about it. But you can. We all can. We always can do something about anything, really. Even if you choose to do nothing, you did something. You chose to do nothing. So that element of power is really, when you walk through everything that we've been talking about, we started off with knowledge and then understanding and then applying that knowledge and understanding in the spirit of wisdom, and then stepping into your courage and understanding your influence and how all of that, your influence, all of that creates impact. And then that impact helps you to understand your power. I just need somebody to hear this and understand that. So that when it's not about credentials, y'all. It's not about who has the most. Now, I will be fair in saying that, yes, some people have an expertise in certain areas. We all do. We all have our giftings, our experiences, our training has prepared us to be experts in certain fields, in certain arenas, right? But we can never enter into a line of thinking that discredits ourselves or anybody else if they do not have a credential or a badge to prove whatever it is that you think needs to be proved, okay? Which is why it requires us to understand that part of having power is having common sense and acting on that, right? Just because you have a bunch of book knowledge doesn't mean you have common sense. Common sense says before you had this credential, you didn't have one. And you are the same person, my friend. So just understand that when you are in a place where you are developing plans, when you're meeting with people, where you're trying to determine what's next, that you don't discount and discredit the voice of those that enter into a space that don't necessarily have a credential or a badge to prove something. They're there. They are showing up in their power. Their power is presence. Even if they're not saying anything, I want to hear from you. What do you think? Bring people in. And if you're the person who shows up and thinks you don't have any power, I'm inviting you to try it. Try it out. Try hearing your voice. I remember I used to hate hearing myself. I still struggle with it at times. But it's because part of my power is my voice. So that's where I was being attacked, is in that area of speaking up, right? Like, you don't even want to hear your voice. So why somebody else want to hear it? True. You got a point. So I'll be quiet, right? But no, that's not, it's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. Speak up. You have power. You have power in your presence. Just being somewhere sometimes is just important, just for people to see you, right? You don't even have to say anything. If you're a shy person, and you're like, I'm super introverted, I can't. Okay, just show up. Sometimes just showing up is what's necessary. If you need to speak up and you have a problem with that, practice. Start practicing speaking. Whether you got to do it in front of a mirror, talking to yourself, talking in front of a small audience, uh, talking with your people, right? Whatever it is, start practicing that because you do have power, you do have influence. Even if you don't like talking, maybe you like writing. Write. Maybe you're a creator, you're in into artistic expression. Do that. We need you to step into your power. There's too many wimps out here. Don't be one of them. Okay, so that's it. I hope you got something from it. I hope this thing recorded the right way this time. Thank you for listening. If you've been encouraged by anything that I said, please share, help others to get on board with being bold and courageous and unpimped. And I'll see you guys next time. And I'm going to close it with a reminder. Say it with me. Be bold, be courageous, be unpimped.